guys, and welcome back to Schlock and Awe, the double feature podcast that celebrates all movies from the sublime to the suspicious. As always, I'm Lindsay Wilkins. And this week, we are looking into alternative dystopic future, or maybe just the inevitable, with a double of Daleks Invasion Earth 2050 AD, The Doctor is in the House, and also Hardware from 1990. And with me is the host of the fantastic Action Addicts podcast, which we'll get into it. Of course, so it is the Action Addict himself. It is Scott Wiley. Hey, how's it going?
Hi, Lindsay. It's going all right. Thank you for asking me to come.
No, thank you so much for coming on, and so thank you so much for suggesting this double. I think it started because you were watching something Doctor Who-ish, and I just remarked, "Oh, I think I like that episode or that Doctor." I can't quite remember. Anyway, it spiraled into this conversation for this episode. I'm very looking forward to it.
I think from memory, I watched the first Peter Cushing Doctor Who film, just Doctor Who and the Daleks. Put it on Twitter, and I think you were one of the few people that was actually interested. And I was like, "Oh, good! There is someone on my Twitter feed that isn't just all about action films." And then I think I said that put me in a Doctor Who mood, and I watched a bunch of other Dalek themed episodes from around that time period. And then I think one of us was talking about this in our DMs, and then I said about this film. And it's like, well, it's a shame we don't have anything to pair it with. And then I suddenly, out of the blue, I suddenly thought of Hardware.
Yeah, which I thank you for that, because now I have Hardware in my life. When I think I sort of said, "Oh, I think I've seen that movie," and I watched it. I went, "Oh no, I have never seen this movie." Because I've been meaning to watch the Cushing Doctor Who movies, is because Peter Cushing is one of my favorite actors. He's one of the secret badasses of the 1960s, with especially his Hammer horror films and playing Van Helsing. So this was, I was like, yes, I get to finally got an excuse to watch one of these movies, and I had a blast, as we'll get into. But first, Action Addicts feels like it's been going strength to strength lately. I mean, you've just been like upping the ante almost every time you put an episode out.
Thank you. I try. Yeah, I mean, it is going from strength to strength. I'd be lying if I said behind the scenes it hasn't been a bit of a struggle and chaos to try and keep it going. But I'm very happy that people seem to be liking the stuff we're putting out. And as I assume you were referring to, then we recently had Lauren Avedon on, which was an absolute delight. I am hoping that to continue doing stuff like that. Obviously, that's more on other people than it is me, but we'll see what the future holds.
No, it was really cool to see, because it is. You've been doing it for about a year, maybe a little, just over a year now.
Less than a year.
Less than a year.
The episodes started going out in January. I started recording them end of last year. I've obviously had a few periods where the episodes haven't been going out consistently, but yeah, overall it's been our 8-9 months.
No, they've been going really, really good. And yeah, the fact that you had Lauren Avedon, I can't pronounce his name, talking about No Retreat, No Surrender, which of course, as soon as I saw that, I think I even messaged Super Marcy, or Marcy as she's known, going, "Oh yeah," who has also been on your show. Am I remembering that? Yes. Going, "Oh, look what's on." She's like, so good. And yes, and she loved the episode as well. So hi, Marcy.
Hi, Marcy.
How's it going? So yeah, it's anything else coming out special that you want to plug before we get into it, or do you want to jump right into some Daleks?
Yeah, let's just go into the Daleks, because at the moment, as some people who listen to my show will know, I'm getting married soon. So at the moment, I have absolutely no idea what the release schedule's realistically going to be like. I know what I'd like it to be like, but I can't promise it.
No, getting married is a big, big deal. So again, congratulations. But yeah, that is a huge thing, and not surprising that, you've been a bit too busy with life and good things in life. So that is excellent. But we're going to get into Daleks Invasion Earth 2050. Scott, as I always like to imagine, we're sitting in the movie theater, curtains are opening. Actually, this did play at the Astor in Melbourne recently. I was really annoyed I couldn't actually go see this. But if you were going to pick a trailer for this movie, what would it be?
That's a good question. As we were talking off air, and I said I struggled to come up with other trailers for this, but I think a good pick for this one would be Children of Men, just because it has a lot of similar themes, if perhaps very, very different execution.
I can't really remember when I last had any hope. And I certainly can't remember when anyone else did either.
Hello, Theo. How have you been? I'm sorry about the theatrics. Police have been a pain lately.
I haven't seen you for nearly 20 years.
Need your help. Not for me, a girl. Need to get her to the coast, past security checkpoints. It's hard for me to look at you. He had your eyes.
So why did you come to me?
I trust you.
Show him.
Now you know what's at stake.
Very different execution. I don't know. There's something about when Britain just wants to do. I mean, and this is fully a Mexican director. Now I'm blanking on his name. That's really annoying. Anyway, very good director of Children of Men. But there's something when the Brits want to do an apocalyptic movie, they really go into it. I don't know. There's something a bit more terrifying than a British dystopian apocalyptic movie than it is, say, an American one.
Yeah, no, I agree. Even though we're talking about Daleks, the one thought I have when I rewatched or watched both of these films is that you can feel that they come from both a different period in time, but also that they came from the minds of the UK.
Yes.
I don't quite know how to explain it without going on a really long rant, but especially with hardware, which we'll get into later, but you can feel the bits that came from England versus the bits that didn't.
You really, really can. I don't know if it's just a British thing that to be... well, no, I have seen Threads, so maybe the end of the world is just more on your mind. And yeah, a trailer I would have considered for either of these movies if I just didn't want to depress the hell out of people. But no, this is just a really good movie. It is by Alfonso Cuarón, who is really just a fantastic director, and it's just one of those movies that just really works. It's such a complete, well-done movie. And the cast is, I'm just looking at the cast now, I forgot who was actually in this. It's insane. I mean, you've got Clive Owen and Julianne Moore, but of course, Michael Caine, because you have to.
Yep.
Chiwetel Ejiofor, which I'm probably mispronouncing. Charlie Hunnam, I'm mispronouncing. Danny Houston. I don't know. It's just one of those movies that you watch and just go, it's really good.
Yeah, it is. And it has some really inventive action scenes as well, which is not something I can necessarily say for this film, but it like you say, the actual films themselves have a lot in common.
They really do. Well, for my first trailer, I'm not going necessarily apocalyptic, but I am going for one of my favorite British science fiction movies, and that is, of course, Quatermass in the Pit, 1967, mainly because of my boy Andrew Kerr, who was also in Daleks.
Get back! Who were they running from? What have they seen? Whom do they fear? There are 5 million answers to these questions, and every one of them is a shocker.
It was what I was afraid of. The thing got a huge intake of energy. The very substance of it seemed to be coming alive. And you can't see this world any longer.
They feel it. They see it. The archaeologist who digs back into the past to unearth more horror than the human mind can bear.
This is a really great movie. If you've never seen it, it's kind of just this really great movie. It starts off, they're in a subway, they're digging, and they find something basically buried under the subway. And it turns out, and you kind of go from there. Once I watched it, I realized how many other movies had riffed on this, including a certain X-Files movie, and also even, I don't know, you might pick this, a dragon movie. But yeah, it is such a great movie. And again, it goes harder than you think it's going to go.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I can't really offer you much comment there because I haven't seen it. I have heard of it, but that's as far as I've got. There's a lot of films like that. I have this conversation with a few people where people assume that I've seen lots of films, and it's like I have, but I ain't seen everything.
No, here's the thing: it's impossible to see everything, and sometimes you can, and sometimes you can't. And that's okay. And then you will get to a time when you actually get to watch Quatermass in the Pit, and go, "Oh wow, that was a really good movie." Oh, you might not, but most people do. I don't know. I really do love this movie. So if you have never seen it, please check it out. Again, another British movie in the 60s that goes way harder than you think it's going to. And in saying that, do you have a second trailer?
I do. You mentioned the Dragon movie, and obviously, like I said, we were talking. So Reign of Fire was one that I was considering. Yeah. But the more I was just thinking about it, and the more we were talking, I actually think what the one I would actually play is the original War of the Worlds movie that the Americans made.
This could be the beginning of the end for the human race. For what men first thought were meteors or the often ridiculed flying saucers are in reality the flaming vanguard of the invasion from Mars.
Looks like they're going to come out of that gully pretty soon. We'll have to rush our defenses to be ready when they do.
We're going to need plenty of reinforcements.
We'll get them. Lieutenant, look!
They slash across country like scythes, wiping out everything that's trying to get away from them.
That explains why communication is cut the moment their machines begin moving.
Montreal's blacked out. Nothing more's come through.
Same thing that happened on the Pacific coast. Anything from them yet?
No, Mr. Secretary. We've had nothing from San Francisco for over 5 hours.
The nations of the world mobilize their armed might, rushing to defend the Earth against the unknown weapons of the super race from the Red Planet.
Yes, I don't think I've seen the original. I know I've definitely seen the Spielberg one with Tom Cruise, but I have never seen the original. I keep meaning to. It's been on my list for quite a while to watch.
As an adaptation of the book, it's not good. But as just a generic alien invasion movie that borrows some of the same themes from the book, it's good. I mean, the main difference being is that, you know, they just kind of attack with spaceships. The walkers are nowhere to be seen, which is kind of the whole iconic thing of War of the Worlds.
It really is.
But, you know, I get why they didn't do that. You know, they're very difficult to reproduce in live action, and especially when that film was made. Yeah,
I was going to say, this is the 50s, isn't it? But yeah, that is another. That's another movie you can see the DNA throughout. I mean, Independence Day uses the ending, except it's a computer virus instead of the flu. But it's still the premise is still there. And of course, Spielberg remade it in 2005 and turned it into a 9/11 parable.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I don't actually like either of the War of the Worlds films very much, but I do think that there's a charm in retrospect with the original that would pair nicely with this, because they're both old school sci-fi, so you have that retro aesthetic of what they thought the vision of the future may or may not be, whether you're talking about aliens or just sci-fi sets or whatever it might be.
Yeah, you're absolutely right with that. And especially as we'll get into my trailer, how World War II absolutely affected how they saw the future, just because they did see Firestorm. So yeah, my second trailer is going to be a TV movie, and that is Fatherland from 1994, another book adaptation, actually.
This April, a tense, terrifying, terrific thriller will rewrite video history. And it's as good as any feature film thriller around these days.
I have a story that will make you famous.
What if?
The biggest secret of the war. Thousands have been killed and protected.
Adolf Hitler. Had won World War II.
Nothing will be the same again. Not for you, not for anybody.
And concealed from the world.
What did you do? We put them in cattle cars and shipped them east.
The most unspeakable crime of the 20th century.
To resettle them in the air.
from Thomas Harris's book of the same name. What if the Nazis won and had in fact invaded the UK? It stars Rutger Hauer and Miranda Richardson. I haven't actually seen this movie since I was a kid, but when I was watching Daleks and just kind of their view of Britain, which is just all this bombed out kind of thing, I went, oh yeah, Blitz. And then I went, hang on, there's a TV movie with it. I'm sure I've seen this. And going back, I found kind of a trailer and I went, oh yeah, I do remember this, because it all hinges on the fact that the Nazis want to have an alliance, try to make an alliance with the States so they can beat Russia. And unfortunately, a little rumor coming out of Eastern Europe is, well, not a little rumor, it's the Holocaust, is becoming uncovered. And it's kind of an interesting idea of what they would cover up if they won. But it's very mid-90s. It's very TV movie-esque, but the cast is fantastic.
That sounds good.
Yeah, I don't know, I kind of miss those old school days of just watching a TV movie over 2 nights, and it was just sometimes you'd see the wilder stuff and like, someone actually put this on television. But with that, we're going to, well, it's kind of a... Actually, we're just getting into it. We're going to go do Daleks Invasion Earth 2050.
This is 2150 AD, the year when human beings are turned into living dead men, robo-men, the underground slaves of the world's new dictators. (2150 AD), a year that will thrill you and terrify you. A year of rebellion as a brave handful hold out in a last-ditch battle for human survival.
Attention! Resist! And you will be exterminated!
Leading the resistance fighters is Peter Cushing, his most thrill-making role. Come along! Aided by Bernard Cribbins, a reluctant traveller.
Have you seen the girl? Where's the girl?
Ray Brooks, the boy with the knack.
Now, Scott, apart from being an action addict, you are also a huge science fiction fan and also manga and all that glorious stuff that I sometimes find a little impenetrable, except for moments from Doctor Who. You watched it as a kid like most other people, or did you come to it when they rebooted it in the early 2000s?
Doctor Who, I've been watching since I was a kid. I watched the John Pertwee era all the way through till Sylvester McCoy.
Oh, wow.
As many of the episodes that were available, they used to, basically they repeated them on a channel that doesn't exist anymore. And they used to stitch all the episodes together in omnibuses so that instead of having to watch like half-hour episode and then when's the next one, they put all of the connecting episodes together in one like 2-hour thing. And we used to to show you how old this was, used to record them on VHS so that we had them, and no one had any issues with that. But also I watched these films, both the Peter Cushing films, when I was a kid as well, because my granddad had them.
Oh, that is so cool. I also kind of grew up with Doctor Who. It was now I'm just trying to break up the list of all the doctors. I sort of remember watching a lot of the Tom Baker, Petrie kind of ones. And it's something that was always on the background, because as soon as that iconic theme song started to hit, it was, oh, okay, it's the Doctor Who. And it was one of those shows that used to terrify me and enthrall me in equal measure, especially when we'll get into Daleks. They terrified me until my brother showed me a skit on TV, which I would have used as a trailer if it wasn't, it's actually more racist. It was a Spike Milligan skit.
I know what skit you're talking about. Yeah.
Yes, I was going to show it, and I watched it on YouTube and went, why do the Daleks have to be Pakistan? I don't understand. Couldn't they just be, what are you doing? Yeah. British sitcom humor in the 70s was incredibly yikes sometime, and I'm a huge Spike Milligan fan. But yeah, I was going to show that. It is kind of adorable, as in the fact that the Daleks are basically just like going destroy to a cup of tea. But yeah, and then the whole thing of comics, when they were talking about it, would always say, well, a Dalek can't go upstairs. They're not that terrifying, which I know they made a point of rectifying when they rebooted the show.
Fun fact.
Yeah.
The Daleks, because a lot of people say that the reboot fixed that.
Yeah.
But actually, the Daleks could do that in Sylvester McCoy's era. They invented Daleks floating, and they did that whole sequence of a Dalek coming up the stairs, terrifying you before the 2005.
Yes.
And it just, because the Sylvester McCoy era is not remembered fondly, shall we say, a lot of people A, have never seen it, and B, the ones that have don't exactly want to go to bat for it, which is a shame.
That I did not know, because I just remember where I was at a friend's place, we were just watching it, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, Daleks, and we made the joke, of course, because Daleks can't go upstairs. Next thing I know, it hovers, and both of them, I just went, fuck. Because the Daleks are intrinsically a terrifying creature, because they're just robots who are out to destroy, but are still very intelligent. So the fact that they had a small weakness always was helpful. When they take that away, you're like, oh, crap, they can get you wherever now. I can't just go up a flight of stairs.
It's funny you say that, because my dad and I have had this discussion a lot about the Daleks used to be scary, and they were scarier when they had weaknesses, and now that they essentially made them indestructible, like they are completely undefeatable, it took away their scare factor because, well, there's nothing you can do. There isn't any way you can really make them menacing, because they're going to lose, because if they win, that's the end of the show. So it just, the way they lose is always down to their stupidity, and it's like, it's hard to be scared of indestructible flying jet fighters, which is what they turned into, because, well, they're going to lose, but there's no way to fight back, you know? It's like, yep, they're going to massacre everyone, but they'll inevitably lose. Oh, no. You know?
Which pretty much happens in this movie, when I think Doctor Who just outlogics them in a way. Like, he sort of goes, oh, you have, because the whole point of Dalek's invasion is that they have no weaknesses, which they keep saying throughout the movie. And I'm just like, but that one you just threw down the ramp, that's their weakness. They've got no brakes, apparently. Which is my favorite moment in the movie. You can almost hear them go, wee, down the thing. But they keep sort of saying, oh, they have no weaknesses, we're completely outnumbered. And it's Doctor Who goes in and just kind of outlogics them. And they're like, oh, okay, no, screw you, we're buggering off. There's more that happens to that, but that was kind of the sense I always, when I watched it, that I got, is that Doctor Who just, because Cushing's Doctor Who is logical to a fault. And when I didn't actually realize going in that this was still the William Hartnell Who, technically. Because everyone who knows Doctor Who knows that he can regenerate, or Doctor Who can regenerate whenever the actor wants to leave the show. These movies were still made when the first Doctor, so they hadn't even thought about this regeneration thing. So I was sort of going, wait, Doctor Who has a niece? What? And then I went, wait a minute, he's still playing Hartnell.
There's a lot of stuff like that. I mean, both of these Peter Cushing films are essentially just feature film versions of Doctor Who stories from William Hartnell's run. And yeah, they did give him more of a family in this film, because they changed the fact that he was from Gallifrey to just being an old man on Earth who invents the TARDIS. So that alone makes it completely different to the TV show.
I love the beginning of this movie, because even though it's a sequel, so it kind of really hits the ground running, but it feels like an episode of the show. You have essentially Constable Tom, played by Barry Cribbins, kind of trying to thwart robbery, but then gets kind of stuck in the TARDIS and therefore has to go on a completely separate adventure. It does actually feel very true to what the show is. It does.
And sorry to correct you, but it's Bernard Cribbins.
Bernard Cribbins, sorry. The legend that is Bernard Cribbins. If anyone, when don't I get things wrong on this show?
It's funny because aside from the fact that I'm a big fan of Bernard Cribbins anyway, I have one of his albums somewhere of his comedy music.
Oh, I forgot he did. Yes.
Yeah. Him being in this at the time he was in this would have been a big deal back then. Like on the poster, his name is right after Peter Cushing's for a reason, obviously.
It is, yeah.
But also I think a lot of people, when they hear Bernard Cribbins and they're thinking that we're talking about Doctor Who, they're not thinking about this. They're thinking about many, many years later when he returned in the reboot show to play Donna's grandfather.
Yes, and that was the Titanic episode from memory?
I don't think he's in the Titanic episode. He might be. It's been a long time since I've seen it, but he comes in with Catherine Tate's Donna, and he's the guy looking up at the telescope. But I think you're right. I'm pretty sure he was in it before then. I couldn't tell you which episode.
I don't know. They all sort of blur in together. So yeah, because after watching this movie, the first thing I did was went and watch Blink, which was a David Tennant episode where they introduced the Weeping Angels, who I were called the Stone Angels for years. I didn't know what they were called. They were just those, because going back to the idea that Daleks are just so omnipotent that you can't destroy them. You just have to do something else so the episode can end in a satisfactory way. So now I tend to think that the Weeping Angels are terrifying as well. Is it the robot men? I am completely... Cybermen. Those are the ones that I actually find terrifying now. So not as much as the Daleks, but I don't know if that's because they've just become so iconic and kind of, like Stormtrooper in Star Wars.
I think the Weeping Angels and the reboot Cybermen kind of took what the Daleks used to be, which is that the Daleks used to be this slow but unstoppable force. As the film says, they don't have a weakness as a race, but you can defeat one individually. Like you said, you could chuck it down the ramp and it falls over, or you can hit it with a really old van and they blow up.
And they do.
Etc., etc. And like in the TV show, they threw blankets over the eyes or they shot paintball guns at them, all these silly things that could defeat one, but you weren't fighting one, you were fighting an empire. And maybe that, originally the Daleks were based on Nazis from the war, especially in the William Hartnell version of this film. There are literally Daleks doing the Nazi salute over the River Thames.
Yes, there is. It's a very specific image I noted down. I was like, oh, hello.
Yeah. And so I think as time's gone on, they've obviously changed what the Daleks were based on. And when they brought them back in the reboot, I just don't think the very first episode that you referenced where he floats and it's one Dalek wiping out a whole base, that one got it. But after that, I just don't think they knew what to do with them because they'd made them so ridiculously overpowered now. It was like, well, how does anyone fight them? How can a regular human actually fight back? I mean, in every horror film, the monster is undefeatable, but you have to have those moments of resisting it. Otherwise, there's no tension. There's nothing to sort of get your heart beating. It's just Jason comes in and chops your head off.
Yes, which is going to be a really interesting contrast to when we get into Hardware, which is all that. But you're right. Daleks is more, not so much, you're not terrified. You don't think anyone's actually going to die, even though what you're looking at is this Daleks have come and invaded Earth. They've pretty much enslaved the whole entire human race. They're taking them to camps. Yes, this is only 20 years after the war, so it's the World War II is kind of ever present over this movie, just because people are watching it. Quite a few of them still remembered it, but because it's Doctor Who, you're still having a lot of fun with it, even though when you actually take 3 seconds to think about what's going on, it's incredibly bleak. Which is why, I kind of did consider for 3 moments showing Threads as a trailer. But yeah, even when they're actually in the prison camp, it turns into the Great Escape when they're actually kind of even though the stakes are incredibly high, I don't think you ever feel that they're incredibly high because you're on a Doctor Who adventure. And at the end of the day, Doctor Who's going to get you out of it, if that makes sense. There's no kind of me going, oh, I wonder if they're going to get out of this one. It's like, no, they have Doctor Who. They are absolutely going to get out of this one. Yeah, and
I think some of that comes down to the fact that it was like you say, it was a big budget science fiction adventure. It wasn't designed to make you feel like this is the bleak reality of the future. Like, it was caused by the Daleks. The Doctor can fix it. And it's almost like you stepped into a parallel world where, well, these aren't real people as such. This is the future. No, none of us will live long enough to worry about it. So it's all good. We can fix it and then leave them to it. I mean, even in this film, the rules of time travel aren't really clear because I never thought about it until I watched it this time around for this podcast. But not to cut ahead but at the end, they drop Bernard Cribbin's character 2 minutes before he left, but his old self ain't there. So I was kind of like, wait, what? How does that work?
Oh, it's like the age-old question every single time they have to ask, why is the TARDIS bigger on the inside than it is the outside? And my always favorite thing is when you get David Tennant going wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey. It's just such an easy way of saying you're not going to understand it even if I tell you anyway. I think he just mentions, it's just, I don't even know what Cushing says, actually.
I do, because I wrote it down because in the first film, he has to basically explain it, and Susan explains it as well, and they go stupidly scientific because they really want to get across that the Doctor is this scientist and his whole family is full of brainiacs, but he's so smart, he reads comic books instead because he already knows all of this. Yeah. And I love the way he explains it to Bernard Cribbins, because he's like, no, it's all relatively simple. Because obviously TARDIS stands for time and relative dimensions in space. And then he's like, so with that principle in mind, space is the fourth dimension, and that means that this is the fifth dimension. Therefore, it all makes perfectly sense because one will accommodate the other. See? Perfectly simple. And Bernard Cribbins' face is like, none of that made any sense. And it's like, no, it doesn't.
No. That is some amazingly Doctor Who bollocks, and I love it. I know he said something. It was very, very simple, but I need to go back and watch the first one. I wanted to try and watch it, and then I got distracted with Dr. No, the other Doctor. So I didn't quite get a chance to watch it. I've got a feeling I'm going to go on a Bond kick very, very soon. The other great British thing that would change is actually, that's a really big British thing as well. I've just realized. Between Who and Bond, you can keep a franchise going for decades because you just we'll just change the Doctor, and every time we do, it's going to be a massive event.
Yep. It's weird too because Doctor Who had to come up with an in-universe reason for doing so, whereas James Bond just went, the actor's changed now, deal with it. Moving on.
Yes. Which probably shows that one of the differences between action, spy, and science fiction. Science fiction, you always need a reason like why the TARDIS is bigger than it is on the inside. Where there's an action franchise can go, well, different actor, deal with it. You're still going to get Bond, but it's just going to be Roger Moore or Daniel Craig. I
think the thing is when they did it with James Bond, and my memory is very rusty on the early James Bond, but obviously Sean Connery had made them all massive success. Then they brought in George Lazenby, and it wasn't.
Nope.
And then I'm pretty sure they got Sean back because they paid him a silly amount of money for that time.
Yes.
And then obviously when they brought in Roger Moore was already famous, at least in the UK, for doing the Saint, and he did the Persuaders and a bunch of other stuff. And I feel like people were willing to accept that because it was like, this is the new James Bond with a new actor. That wasn't that uncommon for films to change actors. In fact, it was quite common.
Yeah.
Whereas in TV shows, it was kind of the opposite. Like once you got a character, that was it. If you left, so did the character.
Yeah.
So I feel like because Doctor Who was this massive success, there was a dramatization that they did starring Bradley something, but his name's escaped me. I want to say Bradley Cooper, and I'm like, that's not his name. But basically they showed you what happened to William Hartnell like during his final moments playing Doctor and how he got the role and all of this. And at the end, it was basically all of the creative team had left. He was the only person left. All the other cast members had left.
Yeah.
And the new people didn't really get it or particularly like him. And he had some mental health issues as well. It's heavily implied that he had dementia, but back then nobody knew, which is why he became so difficult to work with, why he couldn't remember his lines, etc. And so the main producer basically had to fire him. But the show was so successful, they were like, we don't want to lose the show, so he regenerates. Like that was the producer's big solution. It was never supposed to keep the show going for like however many decades it's been going. It was just, we want to keep the show going until it stops being a hit and stops making me money, but it never did.
No, it literally stopped in the 80s with, as you're saying, with Sylvester, and then they had a movie in 96, and then it got rebooted in the early 2000s,
2005.
2005. So it's kind of this amazing thing when you're tracking it. It hasn't, Doctor Who was almost as old as TV itself in the UK. It was one of those first big, it's like this in Coronation Street. It's basically this thing that sort of started in the 50s and just kept going. And it's kind of an incredible feat. And you're right, they didn't think it was going to be still going. They didn't think that picking regeneration because they were trying to get him out of a tough spot would create all this mythology around this character. I mean, I still remember, it was a big anniversary. Matt Smith was leaving and Capaldi was about to take the 50th. They did the movie. I mean, I know it played here the same time it was playing in the UK. So it was like 4 a.m. in the morning. I know my partner goes, you're going to go up and watch The Who. I went, no, I'm going to go and I play like a normal person at like 9 a.m. I'm not going to go on. He got up and watched it. And but it was a big, big deal because it was, okay, 50 years we've been having this thing. It is part of the British pop culture landscape. And now we get to introduce a new Doctor Who into it. And yeah, I just remember being such a big deal. Like I'd already been watching Doctor Who. Like I got back into it with Eccleston, so I was like fully on board for it. And then it was just like kind of got swept up in it. But it's surprising how it sneaks up on you when you don't expect it. Like you forget about it for a while, and then all of a sudden a new Doctor Who. I'm like, oh shit, that's right. I haven't watched any of the Whittaker ones yet. I need to go back. So then I can watch Whittaker. Now I can watch the new Doctor Who they've announced, which should be good. Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be very interesting. So just because I wanted to double check that I wasn't imagining it. The very first episode of Doctor Who aired on the 23rd of November, 1963.
Okay, so not quite as out as Corrie Street, but pretty close.
Yeah, and to be fair, science fiction in inverted commas was not particularly popular back then like it is today. So to get a show of its type to be as strong as it was in the ratings, to basically dominate them for brief periods of time. They weren't all massive successes, but it was successful enough to keep itself going, was kind of, I wouldn't say unheard of, but it was much more of a groundbreaker than I think people give it credit for these days, because you look around and shows of its type are everywhere. But when Doctor Who aired, the very first ones in black and white, that was not the case.
No,
in fact, one of the it's okay. One of the tenets of the show was that they wouldn't do Monsters of the Week. They wouldn't do the tropey sci-fi stuff that they all basically considered trashy. And then they did the Dalek episode, and they exploded more so than the Doctor did. And it was kind of like, maybe we need to rethink that rule then.
What is it, do you think it is about the Daleks? I mean, we've kind of touched on the fact that they are absolutely terrifying, and they especially were terrifying pre-reboot. But what do you think? Do you think it's that voice? Do you think it's the fact that they kind of look like mini tanks? Or is it because we've seen robots now, but do you think it's just in the 60s that people hadn't seen that kind of robot thing, and it just kind of, because they are as iconic or even more iconic than the Doctor?
I think it's a mixture of things. Have you ever seen the original black and white episode, the very first one?
Not the first one, no.
No, I'm not even sure I'm pretty sure it does exist in its entirety, because unfortunately one of the great tragedies of Doctor Who is that most of its early stuff is gone. Which was
about to bring that up, yeah.
pretty much solely on the hands of a particular producer at the BBC who didn't like Doctor Who and just went, burn it from the archives. We have no need of this anymore, which is a whole another conversation. But the footage of the Daleks when they were first introduced, they are scarier in black and white, partly because, as camera quality got better, the imperfections of the Pepper Pots on wheels became clearer to audiences. But when they were first introduced, people would have been watching it on tiny like 6-inch TVs, if that. They'd have been in black and white, and the way they filmed them made them look bigger. The way they filmed them in shadows made them look more menacing, and their eyes, which is something that they lost for a long time, could actually emote because they got bigger and smaller. They do kind of use it a little bit. They do kind of use it a little bit in the film, but they don't use it that much. But yeah, the original Daleks had eyes that could shrink and get bigger, so they could get a little bit of emotion out of them. And I think the fact that they don't have faces, we don't like as a race. We don't like things that don't have faces. And obviously they are just so alien. There's nothing humanoid about them. And I think combine that with the voice, combine that with a great storyline about, funnily enough, being from a world that was completely annihilated by a war. Can't think what parallels they were trying to make there.
No.
And, they believe that they are the superior race. I think everything about them just screamed what people found terrifying at the time, but they managed to make it science fiction-y enough that all the kids watching it just saw a cool alien race. So you had two different audiences finding something to like about them. And I think that's what made them so appealing, is the kids saw a cool alien race that felt like they were alive and had a lot of lore behind them, even though in reality they didn't.
Nope.
But adults, maybe they didn't all realize it, but there was a lot of, as you said, post World War II stuff in their origins and how they acted and what their goals were. And Terry Nation, who created them, at least in paper, I don't think he didn't make the designs. I can't remember the name of the gentleman who did, but he had a whole Dalek empire in his head of what they could potentially be. And I think the fact that he did is why they came across so well on screen, because he took them seriously. Whereas some of the other stuff that was on the show was kind of like, no one cares about this. Doesn't matter if it's a bit crap,
That's true, because I still remember being terrified by Daleks when I was a kid. That and Tom Baker, to be honest. I don't know, that nose. It's very long. Actually, I do love the scarf. I've always had affection for Baker's scarf, but I think he's the one that sticks in my brain the most, even though this would have been reruns when I was a kid. But the Daleks, and that's that voice as well. It's so motionless, and they're always saying exterminate, exterminate. And even in the movie, it is actually kind of terrifying because they've just got on loudspeakers throughout, just trying to get the rebels who are all hiding under London.
They're broadcasting on the radio.
Give yourself up or we'll just bomb the shit out of this place. Like there will be no survival if you don't come out and be subservient to the Daleks. It's kind of, it's not something you notice it because you're too busy grinning, mainly because I do love watching old British movies because I'll recognize certain actors like Andrew Kerr and Bernard Cribbins, making sure I get that name right. Of course, my beloved Peter Cushing. So I'm kind of just having too much fun with it to sort of realize going, oh, this is a Holocaust story. This is exactly what this is.
Yeah. And I mean, the original black and white show got a lot of press, a lot more negative than people realize because they showed London lost, that, it was bombed, it was destroyed. And when they did the film, I don't know if you know, you probably do, but none of it was filmed in London. And I think part of that is the fact that there was no way they were going to get permission to do it again, because the first time they filmed it caused so much commotion and so many people, showed up and it ground London to a halt.
It did,
But also, Shepperton Studios had much bigger facilities to offer, because I'm pretty sure, because there's a lot of behind the scenes making stuff on YouTube. There's a lot of stuff on this Blu-ray, but they have they weren't actually that far from where the TV show was being made at the time, and they just basically had like bigger sets to play with and more money, because I'm pretty sure that Terry Nation was involved with making both of these films, because that's kind of where some dispute with the rights to the Daleks started happening.
Yes, because I know, because it was the BBC that originally, BBC owns the TV rights. BBC. And they were the ones who were making the show, but I know it was because someone bought the rights to use the Daleks in another in movie form, because they were looking at this going, oh my God, we can make so much money if we just make a movie, put Daleks in it, and then put it out there.
And that was Terry Nation, because he holds the rights to the Daleks to this day. His estate and family holds the rights to the Daleks, which is why when they did the reboot, there was a question of whether or not the Daleks were even going to be allowed to be used, and they were, but the family put a stipulation in the contract that they have to stay looking like Daleks. You can update them, but you can't mess with their aesthetic design. They still have to look like they always have, because naturally, the first thing the new people wanted to do was change them, and they said no.
I like that decision, because even though some of I remember them more because I watch them more frequently, and I don't go into the older ones that, I think I've only done it a couple of times once, is that they really wanted to make it the sexy Doctor Who. Like, you get Christopher Eccleston and Tennant and Matt Smith. That is basically saying, oh, look at this Doctor. Isn't he very, very good looking? Don't you actually want to keep looking at him? And usually because it's David Tennant, I'm like, yeah, I actually do. And that works to a certain extent. So they definitely wanted to make it, this isn't your daddy's Doctor Who when they rebooted it.
Yeah. And I mean, they gave Billy Piper as his assistant, but she didn't really stay as his assistant. They massively changed the dynamics of what that meant. But also, as you said, they also then, in my opinion, kind of made a mistake, even though I do like it, but they made the assistant a romantic interest rather than just being his companion.
Yeah.
And that, I think, caused them problems later down the line that they kind of had to deal with going forward. And they've not really repeated it since, because I think they realized that doesn't work.
No, I really like the fact that David Tennant, who is a slightly more of a sociopath, like I know he still kind of felt he was definitely still in love with Billy Piper because she stayed after Eccleston and was with Tennant for a little bit. But then after she left, he became much more of a very selfish, more sociopathic at times which I think really worked, because they were just like, oh, this is making Who more complicated than we want to if we're putting actual emotion into this character. Yeah, you're right. They haven't repeated that, have they?
Not to my knowledge. I mean, I'll be honest, I haven't watched Doctor Who since Capaldi left. And that it's not because I was bothered about the change of the character or anything like that. It's just that's about around the time that was around the time when I moved house and I moved city where I live, and a lot of stuff that I was watching at the time I just wasn't anymore, because either I didn't have time or wasn't able to, whatever the reason. I did go back and start watching some of the episodes, and I was already kind of getting bored with Capaldi's Doctor, and it I don't know, something just wasn't there anymore for me, and it started long before they changed the character Jodie to a woman.
No, I think I fell off a little bit with Capaldi. I don't know quite what's happening. I don't know if it's because Moffat was more interested in Sherlock at that time, and it wasn't, because I think he was running both shows, something silly like that. And then I think I saw the first episode of Jodie and it was fine, though I have heard from a few people that they kind of decided to get into reinvent it, so they kind of changed the structure of the show, which Doctor Who fans are very routine from what I can gather. And I know the original showrunner from Eccleston's coming back for this new one, so it'll be interesting to see what happens, if he's going to bring some new energy into it.
Well, I mean, it's not a spoiler, but I don't know if you know or not, but it's not just him, it's David Tennant and Catherine Tate as well.
I did not know that those two were coming.
There's a lot of question marks as to what the hell is going on at the moment. There is obviously going to be a new Doctor, but the prevailing theory is that David Tennant is coming back for a few episodes, basically to get the ratings back, and then he's going to pass it off to the new guy. But I don't think that they would do that. That's too simple for Russell T Davies, who's the person that rebooted the show originally. So I'm curious to see what he actually does, because I don't think it'll be as simple as that.
No, I mean, to be fair, if you're going to get ratings up, you bring Tennant back, because I know he is my favorite Doctor. I think he had some of the most interesting episodes, and it was a little bit more sociopathic, so you didn't necessarily know if you could trust his motives, whereas the other ones you could always go, oh no, they're the good guy. Do you have a favorite Doctor?
My favorite has changed several times over the years. David Tennant is one of them, and then it's a constant battle in my head between John Pertwee and Tom Baker. Tom Baker has an unfair advantage. He's a lot of original series fans' favorite. He's my dad's favorite.
Yeah.
But he's also the longest running Doctor still to this day. So he has a massive advantage in that respect. Now he has so many good episodes, so many different companions, and so much. He's also the series where Davros was created.
Oh, wow.
And it's like, yeah, Davros didn't exist until Tom Baker's first episode with the Daleks, which is where and it was written by Terry Nation, I'll add as well, which is where they basically rebooted the Daleks because one of my only real issues, and it's not something I realized as a kid, but when I've rewatched them as an adult, the Daleks had lots of personality, lots of goals and ambitions. They had a structure, they had an empire. I mean, that off air, I showed you a figure of a Dalek. That was the Supreme Dalek.
Yeah.
But once Davros shows up, every episode afterwards is a Davros episode. There is not a single Dalek episode that doesn't also involve Davros, and they go from having a lot of personality to being machines, which is a thing in the story. They make a point of saying that.
Yeah.
But when I rewatched the John Pertwee episodes where the Daleks don't have that luxury of falling back on the fact that they have a human, in inverted commas, thing to do all of their emotional and acting baggage, they have to do it. So they have to have personality, they have to have character, and I find those Daleks much more interesting. But that's just me. A lot of people don't seem to agree with me.
No, you do see that in the movie a bit because you're right, they are big characters, they have a lot of ambition, and they kind of take up the screen. And so you're just so excited that you're seeing Daleks, and I think you do see that. I mean, I'm joked about the one sliding down the ramp, but that's kind of the action that they do, and they are absolutely terrifying because of how ambitious they are. They are literally going, we're going to suck the earth of every piece of energy that it has, we're going to use humans for the labor, and then we're going to bugger off when earth is a husk.
Well, their plan, as crazy as it is to turn the earth into a giant spaceship and fly it back to Skaro, which is just, to this day, I don't know how they were going to do that, but it's the Daleks. I believe that they could.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's the Daleks, they're good at anything, but it's, yeah, you're right. They did actually, Sorry, sometimes, as much as I love Peter Cushing, his speeches did go on for quite a while. I was just kind of like zoning out a little bit, which is weird because I adore Peter Cushing. Going back to the Doctor, because we were talking about our sort of favorite Doctors and kind of how everyone kind of has their own favorite Doctor. Peter Cushing doesn't get talked about as much. Is that because he was just in the two movies and not the TV show? Or is it just the older two movies have been forgotten a little bit?
I'd say you're right with everything you just said. He's not recognized as part of the people that have played the Doctor because technically he's playing William Hartnell's Doctor.
Yeah, he is.
So he doesn't, the films don't have any canon with the TV show, but also the BBC hates the films because obviously they didn't get anything from them.
No.
And to this day, I'm pretty certain that there is no real recognition of the films up until very recently, where they suddenly decided they were allowed to be released on Blu-ray. I'm pretty sure recently they got new 4K remasters. But merchandising was such a nightmare back then with the Daleks because of all these rights issues that even now the people that hold the rights to the films don't like playing nice with the BBC to allow them to sell movie Daleks. They did manage to do it sneakily because if people don't know, this is a lot of nerdy stuff, but the cases that were made for the movie for the Daleks, most of them were destroyed during shooting because obviously, as you see, they get blown to pieces, they get wrecked. But some of them survived. Most of them did survive and were rebuilt, even though they weren't all in great shape. But some of them were used on the television show. I can't quite remember the details, but basically they got rented. Like the BBC had to pay the Shepperton, I think, to borrow a couple of Daleks, and the plan was to essentially mutilate them and turn them into TV Daleks and then put them back together when they sent them back. But they couldn't because they didn't have the time. So there are some shots, and I'm pretty sure the episode name is The Chase, where they are there in the background and you really have to look for them, but they are there. They're very obvious because they don't obviously look the same.
No.
But originally it wouldn't have been an issue, but now with like television technology having massively improved, you can see them clear as day. Like they're part of a patrol in the back, and they're like 2 feet taller than the rest of the Daleks. And then Terry Nation kept some of the cases. Like he actually kept his own ones. And when he did a John Pertwee episode, which featured that Dalek that I showed you earlier, it's his personal blue and white Dalek, I'm pretty sure, that was essentially taken into a BBC effects shop, repainted and recolored, and they basically changed it so that it looked different to the movie Daleks, but different to a regular Dalek, so that they could call it a Supreme Dalek. Which is another reason why, like I said, there's all this lovely, complicated stuff to do with who owns the rights to the image of which type of Dalek. Because there are actually television Daleks that have the big bumpers. Because the bumpers were basically used to allow them to move across outside environments. Because one thing that even the movie Daleks struggled with, which you could see in a few scenes, is they're not very stable on open ground.
No, they're not.
When they were originally invented, they were only supposed to be inside the studio on their city, which was all flat metal surfaces. They didn't have to worry about terrain, obstacles, realistically how they could move across any other surface. And then all of a sudden they got thrown into storylines where they had to move across all sorts of environments, and they just kept falling over. They couldn't do it. So they added the bumpers to basically give them that extra balance and support, and give them bigger wheels underneath and bigger traction or whatever it was they needed. But they didn't like how they looked, so they went back to the old Daleks, which meant that they wobble a lot, but that's the image that most fans want, you know?
No, you're touching a good point, because I do love about the movie Daleks Invasion is that they do leave London. They do have to go this like cross country kind of thing to all get to the same place at the end. And also because Doctor Who now has this massive fandom, everyone has their own favorite Dalek. It's not just, oh, I like Daleks. It's like, oh, I like the Daleks from the Petrie era or the Baker era, or I like the new Daleks, or doing with them now, or the original from the original show. It's like Doctor Who is not just the one thing anymore, which is kind of one of the great things about the show, because all this rich tradition. At the same time, I can imagine there are certain people pulling their hair out because rights don't all belong to the same person.
Yeah, I mean, I think that most of the rights issues with the Nation estate have been sorted, in inverted commas, like selling all the other different types of Daleks from the TV show isn't an issue. It's just the movie Daleks that are a pain. But again, they have kind of got around it. Yes, it would be nice if they could just release official movie Daleks with that sort of box art. I mean, they did release stuff at the time because you can still get them. They cost a fortune, like they're on eBay. I am more than happy to say that somewhere in my dad's place are 2 red and black movie Daleks.
Oh,
they're massive.
Yeah.
They like, if they were behind me, they would tower over everything you could see behind me. They are huge.
Wow.
They're remote controlled, sort of. They used to be. They're very old. But yeah, they did have merchandise that looked like the movie Daleks, but yeah, they don't have any nice like small Daleks that look like the ones that are much easier to store, unfortunately. The Dalek merchandise back then looked, to be blunt, atrocious. There are many different manufacturers of Dalek toys throughout the decades, and most of them don't look great. There are some in the 80s, I think, is when they finally got toys that kind of had the shape right. You can't see them, but I'll grab them at the end. But over there, you might just be able to see them. Oh, no, you can't.
No, not
but
quite.
There are Daleks back there. I'll grab some to show you the difference later, because obviously people listening won't appreciate it. No. But they are probably the closest you could get to accurate Daleks from back in the day that didn't cost a fortune or didn't talk or whatever. But they're not got any detail on them.
I think I can actually see them. They're little grey things on the top of the shelf. I think I can. Yes. Yeah. It's absolutely fascinating. I mean, this movie is such a simple movie in one respect, because it's literally Doctor Who goes on an adventure. He kidnaps essentially a companion. He's got his niece and his granddaughter, and they go off and have an adventure and tie everything up in a nice bow at the end. But because it is Doctor Who, it represents so much history in terms of this character, how you feel about him, where it goes, that character means to you now. It's kind of, I don't know, you just get in a really happy Doctor Who mood, and all of a sudden, yeah, I'm putting on Blink.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, like I said, I watched these films growing up as a kid. So, you know, I remember so much. I didn't really need to rewatch this. I did just in case, but I knew so much of the dialogue, so much of the story. I probably wore out the VHS of both of these films because it wasn't like today where you could just put them on. It was a case of you recorded them off the television, or that was it, because they didn't release Doctor Who in VHS box sets like they do with other shows. You know, it was a case of you saw him on TV or you didn't. And, you know, just to hammer home how stupid this is, some of the episodes that are now out on DVD, like for the classic series, those came from fans' recordings of the ones off the television, because the original film prints were all thrown out or recorded over.
Yeah. I know someone has gone and animated a few series from the Second Doctor as well. They actually went and animated, because they had the sound recording, but they didn't have the image. So someone went and animated those episodes. Yeah. So they're not completely lost.
Yeah, I have one of those. I think it's Power of the Daleks. Again, funnily enough, it's a Dalek episode. It's a really good one. And yeah, that's a great way to do it. I love the fact that they did that. Unfortunately, some of them, the animation is more like a motion comic than real animation, but the ones that have the time and the money to do it properly, yeah, those are great.
No, it's such a fascinating thing, and it's such a little interesting time capsule. One, if you are a Hammer fan, just watching Peter Cushing do his thing, even if he can be a little long-winded, but again, he is playing William Hartnell. And that is just kind of what he does, and that's what the Doctor was at that point. But it's still this really, really great fun movie that you just kind of have a lot of fun with. And finally got an excuse to finally sit down and watch it. So this was perfect. I'm like, oh, yeah, so good. Just puts me in the Who vibe.
I love the fact that so much of the Dalek props were essentially reused as well.
Yes.
Because obviously, like you say, you finally sat down and watched it, and there's so much of this film. The sets were reused, the sets were redressed, the sets were recycled, and there's all of the stuff outside the saucer, all of the stuff done where you can see like long corridor shots of the city. That's all one set, just redressed over and over and over again on a stage. And the Daleks, I'm pretty certain that there were only actually 7 of them, and they just got got reused. Yeah, because I know that they reshot some of the action sequences where the rebels attacked and they blew some of them up. The Robomen come in, but if you look carefully, and again, you have to know to notice it, some of the Daleks look really run down, and that's because they filmed the reshoots after they blew them up with the van. So they had to then put them back together. But of course, they were scuffed and marked, and they didn't all quite work as well as they did before that, obviously.
I did see a few. They looked a bit tired.
That.
Yeah. You know, because there are some spectacular explosions, as you say, when an old van that looks like the Postman Pat van kind of runs into one. That's a great moment. Actually, it was weird because I didn't actually see where his granddaughter was, and I thought Andrew Kerr had left her in the van. I was like, oh no, Andrew Kerr, did you just blow up Doctor Who's granddaughter? Then I realized she's kind of like under him. Like, I didn't see it. It's just like the way it was shot, it just looked like she wasn't there. And I'm like, did you just blow up? Yeah. No, but anything else you want to say about this movie before we move on?
It's just that it's one of those films that you can just put on and enjoy the retro. I love the set designs, the ridiculousness, everything about it feels so 60s it's kind of painful.
It really is, more so than a few other 60s movies, because I was like, did they actually film this in the same BBC set? I know it's not, but when they're in that room with the chalkboard, or when Doctor and the rebel leader are talking, I'm like, this feels like such a Doctor Who set. It's just like this dark room that you can tell it's been repurposed for 6 different things. But yeah, no, it is a wonderful little movie. And so with that, we're going to go for a hoot of a movie to a movie that has, well, a lot of things going on. And that is, of course, Hardware. Scott, if you're going to choose your first trailer for Hardware, what would it be?
Blade Runner.
I need your deck. This is a bad one. The worst yet. There was an escape from the off-world colonies 2 weeks ago. 6 replicants, 3 male, 3 female. They slaughtered 20.
A Blade Runner's job is to hunt down replicants. Manufactured humans you can't tell from the real thing.
What's this? Roy Batty. Probably the leader.
There was just one outfit making replicants that superhuman. The Tyrell Corporation.
Mr. Deckard, Dr. Eldon Tyrell.
I don't get it, Tyrell.
Commerce is our goal here at Tyrell. More human than human is our motto.
I was looking for 6 replicants in a city of 106 million people.
I totally had thought of this. Yeah, there's a definite Blade Runner theme with this movie, isn't there? Oh, not theme, tone, I should say.
Yeah, tone. They definitely feel like they could be from the same world. Mm-hmm. Obviously, Blade Runner would be the nicer side of the world.
The nicer neighborhood.
Hardware lives... Mm-hmm. Yeah, Hardware lives in the rundown city that's kind of been neglected and abandoned, but it really wouldn't be hard to imagine that, you take a drive on the freeway and you're in the other place,
You really would, especially how the light works and everything like that. It has a very Blade Runner, except this part does not rain at all. As we get into, there's a line when they go, oh, I thought it was raining. Oh, I wish. No, this is, this is not the Blade Runner's comparative is the place you want to be, and not this place. Yeah, no, that is a really, really good trailer. I have gone so up and down on Blade Runner. I'm in the stage where I love it, but there have been times when I did not get into that movie, and I don't know why.
Well, I suppose it also depends what cut of the movie you were watching, which never helps.
No. And I probably don't even know which cut I was watching when I didn't like it. I do really like the Ultimate. I think that's the one I've settled on that I like.
Yeah.
Have you ever watched the original cut with the Harrison Ford narration?
I've not seen it in its entirety, but I have seen scenes with his narration, and I go back and forth on it, because the funny thing is, the very, very first time I watched Blade Runner, which wouldn't have been the Ultimate cut. I don't know what cut it was, but it definitely didn't have the voiceovers. I actually remember thinking and saying that he felt so much like a noir detective that I'm surprised there wasn't voiceovers in certain scenes. And lo and behold, when that footage finally came back, it was exactly the scenes where I thought they would fit. Yeah. So I don't think they were bad. I don't think they were the reason that the film didn't do well. I just think that the package as a whole was just never going to do well with mainstream audiences,
No, and plus they decided to try to put it up against E.T., which was just disastrous. So many movies that little alien just ran over and just went, screw you. This is a really good movie. I think, the Ultimate Cut is the one I've settled on. There's a really cool atmosphere to it that you just kind of like living in. Not quite like Hardware, because as I said, Hardware is like the if you go down the freeway, ending up on the definite, this place. But it's a classic for a reason. It's I haven't seen the one with the narration. I'm keen to, but just because you've heard so many rumors about this thing of how Ridley Scott really didn't want narration, but you hear that even Harrison Ford I don't think wanted to do the narration. But it is such a noir kind of movie.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with Harrison Ford is he goes back and forth. Like, if you go through enough interviews, he almost contradicts himself with what was and wasn't said, which I'm sure a lot of it is just down to his memory.
Yeah.
Because, for us, it's like we want all the nitty-gritty details and we commit these things to memory. For him, it was just a job.
Yeah, it was.
And I think a lot of people struggle with that reality, you know? Ridley Scott has said multiple times that the final product and what he wanted to make were two very different things, because studio interference was very high on that particular film, which is weird because he was already a success by that point. You think they'd have just left him alone?
Yeah, I mean, he made Alien, and so it was just like, yeah, leave the man alone. Okay, so I'm not going to go for my big budget one first. I'm actually going to go, well, Albert Pugh made a few dystopian movies, but I'm going to go with Radioactive Dreams from 1985.
My name's Philip, and this is going to be a yarn about me and my pal, Marlo, about the day we got out of the shelter and went off into the post-nuclear world, where we both dreamed becoming private eyes, just like the ones we'd read about.
You think the world's changed much? Nah.
A burst of light in air, and seconds later, we'll be up there. It's not so strange, and if we stick together, we'll stay sane.
Okay, a movie I have never seen, because there's a copy on YouTube that didn't look too bad actually, which I might end up watching, because I know you've actually done a very good episode with Rob Antequera, I think it was Rob, on Cyborg, which was a great episode. But looking at what I've seen of Radioactive Dreams, because again, very noir actually, and well, Hardware changes its genre depending on its mood, but yeah, Radioactive Dreams is such that kind of very self-contained nuclear dystopia, and two guys descend to go on a road trip so they can be noir detectives, I think is pretty much the plot. I do need to see this movie, but the trailer is cool.
I've never seen it. I obviously, like you say, I did an episode on Cyborg. I plan to do a couple of other Pune movies. Probably not that one, though I probably will check it out at some point, because I do like his style. But yeah, I mean, anything by him, in all honesty, would fit with this film. I did briefly consider Cyborg. I also considered the other one that the name is escaping me, which is going to annoy me because it's the
Nemesis.
one that stars Olivia Grenell. Nemesis, thank you. I considered both of those as trailers, but in the end, I thought, other than the fact that they're both post-apocalypses, it's too obvious. I think I was kind of like, they're the first things I thought of, so I don't want to pick them.
No, I'm not going to go too much into Richard Stanley he knowingly makes good movies, but he does have a kind of Pune style, but just not quite what Pune does, as in Pune has this kind of knack for making really low budget movies feel bigger than they are. I mean, with what's his face, Grenier, I think, sliding down backwards and doing the woo two gun things when he's sliding down a literal slide. But no, Pune knew how to work a post-apocalyptic landscape. Like, he could just go to a construction site, or just this kind of weird piece of land film, or even a weird swimming pool for, I can't remember what it was called. It's really, really fun movie. Rutger Hauer's in a wheelchair. It's bugging me now. Anyway, really good movie, even if the terrorists are still wearing their pool polos when they take over everyone. I don't know. I find that thing very amusing. But no, I'm assuming something to do with music rights, but if we could get like a really nice release of Radioactive Dreams, that would be great. Because I do actually want to see this movie, even though I did find something on YouTube, which I'm just going to have to bite the bullet and go, I'm watching this on YouTube.
Yeah, unfortunately, some movies you can't just have to do that with. It's annoying, but that is the only way you're going to actually be able to watch them.
Yeah, and Pune is one of those directors that I think should get more things behind him, because I think he's such a fascinating director. So yeah, that is my first trailer. What is going to be your second trailer?
1986's Shopping Mall.
Has a new security system, completely mobile, user-friendly, and absolutely fail-safe. But something is going wrong.
There's another one of those things out there.
Waiting to pick us up one by one!
He ain't getting me.
I also thought about this one. I just saw this for the first time a few months ago, and that movie is fun.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I really like that film. I watched it for the first time a couple years ago, and it was, I'm gonna give pure credit where it's deserved. I'd never even heard of that film until In Search of Darkness, the documentaries about horror films, came out, and that was one of the films they did, because obviously they've done like 3 of them now, but I think the very first one, I'm sure they talked about Chopping Mall, or maybe it was the second one, I can't remember, but they played clips from it, and I was like, I like killer robots. How have I not seen this or heard of this? So I tracked it down and I thoroughly loved it. There is another one as well that I don't know if you've seen. It was in the 90s called Evolver.
No, I haven't seen that one.
Yeah, see that one, I can't find it other than my VHS tape, which is probably covered in mold. I've never been able to find that one. But basically, a kid wins this robot for succeeding very well at a video game in an arcade. The robot is programmed to beat it, and it's programmed to evolve to get better, so that it's always getting stronger as an opponent, which is how the video game works. The problem is it takes its program too seriously, realizes that its toy weapons it has is never going to be able to succeed that objective, so it starts replacing it with things that will cause real damage and starts getting bigger and stronger, literally, by figuring out that it can't kill him with, like, foam missiles, but a fork would do the job if fired very fast, for example.
No, this is great. Chopping Mall might be Jim Ryoski's, butchering his name, best movie. I mean, if you ever want a schlocky director, that's the guy. I love how this weirdly has a connection to a 1980 or 1982 movie called Eating Raoul with Mary Warnoff and Paul Bartel. They're the 2 snarky people when they're doing the demonstration in the crowd. Yeah, they're apparently the same characters from Eating Raoul, and I'm just like, that is the weirdest thing ever, because I think there is a Corman connection, because Dick Miller's in this, being amazing for 2 seconds before he's like thing. But yeah, I thought for years this was a typical slasher. There was actually a killer in the mall. I didn't actually realize for a long time, probably until that documentary you're referring to, when I went, wait, this movie is Robot? What is this movie? And I finally sat down and watched it, and it's really fun. I mean, yeah, it's got it's got that kind of mix between feeling like a great Roger Corman movie and a typical 80s slasher, because you've got Barbara Crampton, Kelly Maroney, and then you've also got the Dick Miller, the Mary Warnoff, and Paul Bartel kind of thing going on. It is a supremely weird and bizarre movie with some really great kills in it, considering it's the robots just like shooting lasers at people. Or no, wait, they're electrocuting them, aren't they? Bit of both. I don't know. It's gorier than I thought it would be.
Yeah. I think the in-universe explanation is that it's electric, but yeah, it's basically just firing lasers at people.
Yeah, I think they do try and think, and then by the end of the movie, it's like, screw it, they're shooting lasers. But no, that is a great pick. Actually, I'm not going to go with my original one. I am going to go for a nice robot movie. This movie was technically released last year or this year, depending on when it was made, that kind of thing, or when it was released wherever you are. And that is, of course, Brian and Charles from 2021 officially.
Tony? Charles?
Charles.
Charles?
Charles.
You like that name, do you?
Hello, Brian.
Hello, Charles. It's lovely to meet you. This is incredibly overwhelming. Imagine me and you. I do. I never thought I'd make anything as amazing as Charles.
You built my body.
I built his body.
And my tummy is a washing machine.
And his tummy is a washing machine.
So happy together.
You show him to people. Why not?
How much you want for him? Oh, he's not for sale. Why are you wearing that?
I feel pretty cool, man. I want to go on an adventure. Everything is lovely.
It's not all lovely. Stay down, boy. There's a big old world out there. A big, perilous world.
Oh, my gosh. Okay. What was that?
Okay.
Perilous. So very perilous.
Yeah, this is a directed movie by Archer. This is actually features a character that was on a few Ricky Gervais shows. Because it's essentially about this guy who's kind of a loner living in a small Welsh town who builds a robot who is fully sentient, called Charles Protrosky. And it's kind of about David Earl plays Brian. And it is literally just this guy now raising this robot who is literally going through the stages of childhood. So when Charles becomes a teenager, it's freaking hilarious. It's a crowd pleaser. It's more of the robot you want in the house, not the one that you get in Hardware. Okay, I was going to go RoboCop, but we're going Brian and Charles. And it's kind of one of those movies when there's a particular character that finally gets their comeuppance, you want to cheer. It's just that kind of movie. It's making you wanting to smile. It is laugh. The robot is hilarious. He's got a washing machine for a tummy. And the only thing I will say is that I don't know why this is a mockumentary. They kind of start off with it and then they completely forget that it's a mockumentary. So I'm like going, some really weird editing choices there. Are we still in a mockumentary or what's, I don't know, what's going on? But yeah, it's still definitely worth a watch.
Yeah, it got advertised to death over here when it came out.
It would have, yeah.
Which kind of put me off. I really detest that. But yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, and yeah, that's an interesting pick.
Not exactly in line. I mean, yeah, this is the kind of Welsh town that you actually want to go and hang out for a while.
Yeah,
it looks charming. It's got that one kind of local store, one pub kind of feel to it. But yeah, no, I can imagine how this would annoy the living snot out of people, especially if it just got advertised a lot. This was more of a charming surprise for me because I wasn't expecting it. So yeah, that is my pick. And with that, we're going to go into the complete opposite world of what that movie was and going for Hardware.
I give you 30, 40, 50. And they can see it my way.
Only some of the stuff that gets thrown away isn't dead.
Mo?
Merry Christmas, baby. I got something else you like.
What is it?
It's asleep.
Fairwell Electronics presents its new model, the Mark 13. The Mark 13 is self-repairing, capable of recharging its storage batteries from just about any power grid, including the sun.
And when it wakes up, it'll become something entirely new.
I gotta see. It's important. Meet me in 1 hour.
A creature that combines the technology of a computer, the deceit of a human, and the killer instinct of a machine.
Chase, listen to me. This is serious.
Jill is in trouble.
When was the first time had you seen this movie before? Or
no, this was also my first time watching it.
Oh,
which is
wow.
why, as I was watching it, I went, "This is not the best pairing with Doctor Who." Apparently, I mean, I knew it was different. Like my whole original reasoning was that they have similar concepts in that killer robots. Even though I just said the Daleks aren't robots, they aren't. But the film treats them very, very similar.
Yes.
And I just thought the other connection, which I might have to go into a bit more detail on, is that they both originate from the UK. So it was like they both have similar tone. Not tone. They both have similar ideas, but very, very different execution. I didn't realize how different, obviously, until I watched it. But I had read the short story that Hardware is based on, which is 2000 AD's Shock.
Okay. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. I was thinking how 20 thingy AD this was actually kind of feeling, and now it is. Yeah.
Well, just because it's worth sharing, Hardware wasn't technically a licensed adaptation. They actually got sued horrifically because they tried to pass this off as an original film.
Yeah.
And they basically 2000 AD basically got sent lots of letters by fans going, "Have you seen this film Hardware? Because if we told you what it's about, you'd think we're talking about your comic." And they were like, "What?" And so they watched it and they were like, "Yeah, that's and it went to court and they lost."
Oh no. So it's like John Carpenter watching oh my god, what was that movie called? Guy Pearce, when they were ripping off Escape from New York. Anyway,
yeah, I don't know the name of it either, but
yeah. But John Carpenter's looking at it going, someone didn't pay me for this. Yeah, you're paying me.
Yeah, so at the end of the film now, there is a big paragraph about the fact that this is based on 2000 AD's work by such and such. But yeah, that wasn't there originally. They tried to argue that it wasn't that similar. Like, yes, it clearly has shared ideas, but it wasn't that similar. And they were like, it's so similar that the only stuff you added is the stuff that's kind of grimy and disgusting, which I actually like.
I do.
All the other stuff is kind of just like, there's no way that the person that made that hadn't read the comic strip.
Yes, because I thought that I had seen this like when you're at a house party and someone throws on a movie. I thought it was one of those that I'd kind of sat down and watched. I think I was getting this confused with something like, I think the title is Mind Warped. I don't know. It's Bruce Campbell in a desert telekinetic post-apocalyptic kind of world. I think I was getting confused with this one. That is not it. But when I was sort of watching it, I did get that very British feeling connection of this dystopian world where, again, Daleks technically aren't robots, but they are very much treated like robots in the movie. So it's these kind of post-apocalyptic robots kind of thing. But it's kind of fascinating as in when there's a very specific style a British production will do when they're making something about a horrific future. And it always feels, and again, going back to the World War II thing, but it always feels like, we're taking our experience of something that has happened and we're putting into film, even though this also, when you said 2000 AD, I went, that makes so much sense. This movie feels so 2000 AD because when you even look at something like Judge Dredd, it's got that same sticky, not the sleaze. I mean, the sleaze was definitely added, but the sticky kind of everyone's ill kind of feeling. If that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it does. That was everything about this world feels off. It feels grimy and nasty, and it like everything needs to be cleaned.
Yes.
As bad as that sounds, but it to me, even though this is made in 1990, but this is the sort of film that I watch, and I remember within 5 minutes of them meeting the salesman that's going to buy their scrap from them.
Yes.
I remember saying out loud, this film would not get made today like this. There is no way on the face of this planet you'll be able to find a film that has this tone and aesthetic the way that they've portrayed it.
I'm surprised they got away with it in 1990, to be honest. This feels 70s. This feels like the exploitation grindhouse you would find in the 1970s. Even, I mean, because you have I was trying to get what's his name? The guy who plays the neighbor. He is so disgusting.
William Hootkins.
Yes, Hootkins. I remember looking at the name going, that is a very interesting way to say your name. Hootkins. The stuff that comes out of his mouth, and it's mostly just so sleazy and so disgusting, you kind of want to have a shower afterward. And this is a kind of a movie where you want to have a shower. I mean, the amount of times poor Stacey Travis is thrown through something or is, even in the shower at the end, I'm like, I need to clean that shower. That shower is disgusting. And that's meant to be the one clean kind of place in the apartment that they established. It's white. It's kind of got water. It's kind of the clean. When you see the robot at the end, I'm like, I need to clean that mold right now. This is gross. I need to get in there and scrub.
Yeah, I there's a lot about this movie. I mean, William Hootkins plays that stalker, creepy, scary guy to perfection. I mean, it's so unsettling, but it's not just him. Like you said, the thoughts on the director aside, the way the whole film is shot, it sets you on edge from the word go. But the more it pulls you into the world, the less you like it, and I think the less you want to be there.
Yeah.
And obviously they make a point of being like, well, there ain't nowhere else to go.
No.
Like this is the nice part.
Yeah.
You know, it's this, or you can go out into the desert and get irradiated, or you can go off to war and probably get slaughtered.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you this is the nice place. I mean, Dylan McDermott's character Moses even says when he comes in a few months ago, this building used to be nice. What the hell happened? And they're like, oh, someone drove a car through the entrance and now people just run, you know, do whatever they like. And it's like, right. So someone drove a car through it and now the building's just open for anyone and no one does anything. Like there's no police, there's no real security. There's just, you really are just taking your life in your own hands going outside your front door.
It really is. I mean, if you have to go to help from William Hootkins, that's when you're in trouble. I mean, that is kind of what Jill, the character, has to do is when she can't get back into her building, she has to go to friggin' Hootkins, who then just proceeds to basically keep hinting of like, oh, I'm probably going to rape you in a moment. Kind of thing. And it's like, ugh. Yeah, because when I first started watching this, I was like, what the hell is this? Because it starts very kind of slow and very calm, and the movie kind of ramps up in a really nice way to the point where every 5 minutes you have to try and kill this robot. I mean, you were sort of saying about the Daleks, how there's no real way to sort of get at them and you're not really resisting. But in this one, they are literally killing this thing every 5 minutes and just keeps coming back. It's like, why won't you die already?
Well, the thing is it was left in the desert, but even at the very beginning of the film, its hand is moving. Like it was never dead to begin with, which is the thing that everybody misses.
Yes.
Like it plays dead because it realizes it can't do anything in its current state. But once it's left alone, it starts somehow putting itself back together with just random parts, which I wasn't quite too clear on how they were doing that. But I'm like, whatever, go with it. It's very advanced tech.
I need to rewatch this again because I'm wondering if I'm missing things in the background, whether I'm just sort of watching Jill in her day-to-day or Moses kind of complaining or doing whatever Shades is kind of doing, that if I missed kind of the robot in the background, because the first chunk of it is very kind of slow. It's just very kind of this day-to-day of what this world is. Yeah, so you've got this ex-soldier or someone, he's more of a scavenger now, so he brings this thing home, he tries to sell it, trying to get more information on it, and then all of a sudden when it comes to life, it's like, oh shit, that he's not even going to pretend. Like, I don't think there's a scene where he like tries to be friendly. It's just literally, I'm going to kill everyone that I come across.
Yeah, because the robot head and hand was retrieved by the Nomad, because it wasn't retrieved by the soldier. He buys it off of the Nomad, whereas the Nomad wanted to sell it to the other guy, the short guy.
Yes.
But he buys it and then asks the guy how much it was worth, and he's like, "No, it's not worth more than 30." But he paid like 50 for it because he wanted a present for Jill. So yeah, like he didn't even know where it came from, what it was. So he had no hope of realizing how stupid that decision was. But then at the same time, it was a helmet. There was nothing, I can't really say I blame him. It was just looked like a random helmet that you'd find on the side of the street,
It really does. It looks very innocuous. And it's not until Jill starts sort of playing with it and uses it in sculpture that it kind of takes on a form. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'm here and I'm just going to kill everyone. But going back to Moses, I kind of like the fact that he's useless. I mean, he's the character that you start off with. I mean, because it's Dylan McDermott, he has top billing in it when it obviously belongs to Stacey Travis. But as soon as he goes up against the robot, he is killed instantly. I mean, it's not like Stacey, who's thrown out of windows, actually having to constantly try and kill this thing. He goes up against it. He gets stuck with whatever thing, poison or drug that he's giving people, and it's just like, oh, and he is done. It's like, oh wow, you are completely useless to Stacey. I mean, when she sort of says, "I don't know why I keep letting you in," I'm like going, yeah, why do you let him in?
Yeah, that's very much a running theme with his entire character. Is you realize, like you said, he's an ex-soldier, but you don't know that he's supposed to be this soldier that comes back every now and then, but actually he's not. He got kicked out.
Yeah.
And he's not particularly nice either. Like,
Nope.
it takes a while for it to creep out that he's kind of an asshole. It's kind of there in the very beginning if you look for it, because Shades, it's pretty obvious to me that Shades also likes Jill, and he's just kind of like doesn't get a hope with Moses around. But Moses is not particularly supportive. He's not particularly protective. Half the time, I'm not even convinced he has very strong feelings for Jill, because when he comes in to save her, he completely ignores her and just concentrates on killing the machine, which is, I understand that.
Yeah.
But once he's like thinks he's killed it, she has to go to him.
Yeah.
He doesn't even turn around to look at her, you know?
No. And there's that moment where it looks like he's about to shoot her. That's how I thought it was going to go. It's like, oh, he puts the gun up, he shoots before he realizes it's Jill, but it's this really long moment, and then she ducks, and then he shoots the robot. So if she hadn't ducked, he just would have shot her. And it's, you realize that he's kind of the red herring of, oh, this is your hero, because again, you realize, oh, you think he's this one thing when he's buying a gift for his girl he's about to go see, but it's more the fact that he can get probably a room for a couple of nights before he goes on his travels again. It's not...
Wow. A room and benefits.
Exactly. Because that sex scene goes on for a long time. But it's just this kind of thing where I'm watching it going, oh, he's a dickhead. He's not, oh, yep. And now he's knocked off really easily. I mean, Jill is thrown out of window and into another apartment. I mean, she goes through the absolute ringer when it comes to trying to battle this robot. And she's just like trying to get out of her house. It's not like kind of like Doctor Who. The stakes are really huge, but you don't notice it because of the tone. The stakes are really kind of small. It's literally, she's just trying to get this thing out of her apartment before it kills everyone. She's not, because her apartment is her safe space. She has, security so she can let anyone in. It's her kind of safety from the rest of the world. And now she's got this thing in there and she's trying to get it out. And it's a really, I actually really do like this pairing a lot, even though it's not like obvious, but I think there are some like little tentacles of like tone and how Britain's always goes way harder than you think they're going to on post-apocalypse movies and this kind of thing. And that you realize that even though she's trying to save this little bit of space, it doesn't mean anything in the end, which is really depressing.
Yep. Yeah. I also love the random cameos because, like, when they get into the taxi at the beginning,
yes,
Lemmy driving the taxi, and he puts on Ace of Spades, and I was just like, "What?"
I didn't click, and even with the Ace of Spades, I'm like, "Wait, Lemmy." Was that the taxi? Yes, it was. Okay, go back and watch the Taxi Driver. Okay, and then of course, Iggy Pop being a DJ or something.
Yeah, he was the radio guy that was always talking whenever the alarm went off and the radio ticked on. He was Angry Bob.
Yeah,
and it really it kind of annoyed me because I was like, why does Iggy Pop get such like name recognition on the front when he's not even really in it?
No,
like it's just his voice, whereas Lemmy's actually in it.
Yes.
All right, he doesn't do a lot, but he's at least there.
Yeah.
You know, he should get his name there instead.
He really should. I mean, because Ace of Spades was a British band. I am remembering that correctly.
Ace of Spades is a song, but Motorhead is a British band. Yeah.
Yes. Sorry. I do actually listen to Motorhead a little bit, so I can't believe I actually got that mixed up. But yeah, it's kind of like you've got more British rock royalty in the taxi, and he's kind of the afterthought. I'm like, come on, guys.
I know. It. I don't understand the thought process there. I don't get it at all.
No. Especially this is such a Britity movie, even though it's set in America, even though they all have American accents, except for John Lynch, who's looking like he's in the, oh God, I'm blanking on all the band names. This is Morrissey. One of those early 80s kind of not quite punk, but not quite goth bands. It's kind of this really all over the place. I mean, this movie is really all over the place. 1 minute, I mean, I love the soundtrack to this, actually, when you've got that Western twang and then that noir music and then something else happening. This movie will change its mind on what kind of genre it is every 5 minutes. And I do actually like that about it.
Yeah, no, I made a note that it's like it has the typical space boony music of the Western guitar, but with the images of a modern, I say modern, a futuristic modern living space.
Yes.
But it looks like a Western in the middle of nowhere, even though you're actually in a big city, because that's how broken everything's become. Because they even have like a little, like you say, in that first bit where it's all very slow.
Yeah.
They have a conversation about how they could just go to space and go to another planet or go on a ship. And so it's like Earth isn't really cared about, is the impression I got that they were trying to imply, is Earth is just where everybody that can't get off of Earth is.
Which is Blade
yeah,
Runner.
like,
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I also love some of the, like you were saying about the music. I love the song that they reused by Public Image. That was great. And it's just the stuff you don't expect. Like you have that shot where the robot first opens its eyes, and then that goes into the shower head, which goes into Jill having a shower, which goes into the sex scene.
Yes.
And then at the end of the sex scene, bear in mind, we've just said that Moses is the asshole in the relationship. He turns over to Jill and says, "God, I love you." And she just responds with, "So?" And I was just
that.
like, what? And then he sort of rolls away like, "Oh, okay." It's just not what you typically expect, but it fits the world.
It does. And you've also got this very intense sex scene. And then you also realize that Hootkins is spying on them using infrared almost. Or he's got little holes around the apartment that he can just like spy on her. And he's saying the most disgusting things, which is making the whole thing so sleazy that I'm like, am I in a Fulci movie right now? Am I suddenly in New York Ripper? What is happening? And
yeah, he has that massive telescope.
Yes.
He's other stuff is happening that he does, so you can guess. But also they make a point of showing you his apartment, and he's got crystal clear photos of her, like dressed, undressed, everything about her he has. But also they show you that he has like shoes and clothes, which I'm guessing she's thrown away. It's never made it to the trash because he has them. And it's like, it's disgusting. It's unnerving. You don't want to watch it, but I like it because this is what actual obsessive behavior and stalker behavior looks like. It's not the clean, sanitized version that we get in a lot of films today.
No, it's not.
A nice thing. And this is why it's horrific to go through.
Yeah, it is absolutely horrific to go through. And I think that is a really good point. Also, I think it adds this extra sheen of slime to the movie, which it already has. Like it does. This movie is incredibly sleazy and incredibly awful. I mean, it's a beautiful, ugly movie. I mean, it's not pretty to look at, even though I think some of the light, especially when she's trying to communicate with it and you've got the lights reflecting on her face. I think that's a gorgeous shot. But this movie is just so brown, everything's dying, and everything like that. And then you get the added thing of him basically and one content's like suck him dry is fine, but when you're actually watching a woman who thinks she's having privacy and having sex with a man she's clearly not in love with, but he's there and whatever, it's kind of more disturbing. I don't know. That's why I keep thinking I'm surprised this even got made in the 70s, because the 90s, because this is such a 70s grimy thing that they would do. It's right out of like 1976 at the drive-through. And that's kind of when, this is awful. This is disgusting. This is like, okay, just humanity is done. There's no hope at all.
Yeah. And I just love how uneasy a lot of the build-up shots do, because it does the thing that I actually dislike when films do now, but this film manages to do it in a way that works, which is that there's no sound, there's no music. All of a sudden you're on edge because you're like, oh God, there's a jump scare coming. What's about to happen? And then a character will start to do something and you're like, yep, something's about to pop out of somewhere. And nothing happens, but it just cuts to a different scene of just someone doing something completely normal. And every single time I jumped. And I'm like, I hate that, because normally it doesn't work because it's coming. But because they don't do that fake out of like, oh, it's a cat. Oh, it was just someone with a torch. It's like, nope, we're just going to cut to something completely normal. You're like, what? And it just really messes with your head, you know?
It's the everyday is awful. There is no, that's kind of what I loved. I mean, I was almost going to choose RoboCop as a trailer because there's this really fascinating, because you don't, except for a couple of shots at the beginning and right at the end, you don't get a sense of what is actually happening in the outside world, except for the Iggy Pop and ads and kind of things she's watching on television. So you get the announcements of like, hey, we've got a whole great sterilization program. Come in and, you know, get your tubes or, you know, dick tied. And all these kind of like right at the end, that is very, very chilling because you realize, oh, this was just a government thing. They've just decided they're just going to kill all the people on Earth. They're done. It's not even, they're not even really going to try and hide it anymore, but get your lazy asses and get a job. Even though there is literally no work. Like even, Moses keeps complaining is like, why don't you like make some art that you can actually sell, you know, make some money. And she's like, don't tell me, which fair enough. It's like, don't tell me what to do. Don't make me feel bad about my art. It's this really kind of fascinating thing. And RoboCop may be more successful at this only because it's goddamn RoboCop, but it really sort of sets up the world really well without you actually having to go outside and look around. Like, you know that everyone and who is living in this space is fucked.
I also think that was the specialty of the director, though. Paul Verhoeven is that.
Paul Verhoeven, yeah.
Because I feel like he did that with almost every film he made around that time, like Starship Troopers as well, and the other one that my brain is blanking
Total
on.
Recall.
Total Recall. It was Total Recall. I was going to say that, and I thought, no, that wasn't him, but it was him. But all three of those films are totally different, but they all feel like they you know the world in the short, brief glimpses you get of it. And I think you kind of get that here, but like you said, nowhere near as well, because I think the point they wanted to make is she just basically lives in her apartment, and that's as much of the world as she's kind of interested in, aside from what you hear on the news. And I feel like it's interesting because when this film was made, the internet didn't really exist, especially not how it does now.
No.
And we didn't have the way of communicating like we do now. And so being stuck in your apartment was extremely isolating, but no one could have really related to that, except since then, we have all experienced living inside, being unable to do much else. And it's kind of weird to make that connection now, some 30 years after this film was made.
Exactly. That would have been a very odd concept to people pre-2020. And now we're just like, oh yeah, no, I get what that's like. Like, you're stuck inside and all you're getting is snippets on the news. And of course we have the internet, which helped and hurt at the same time. But it's absolutely fascinating. Though, tangent, Paul Verhoeven also did that exact thing with his latest movie, Bernadetta, which is set in like the 1700s in Italy. But he does it through fantasies, because it's about this woman who's she is an actual prophet or she's pretending to be like a mystic prophet and having like conversations with Jesus and all that kind of thing. But she keeps having these weird romantic cover, like a Mills and Boone-esque kind of fantasies about Jesus. But it kind of works. It kind of works the same way as the I'll buy that for $1 on in RoboCop, or the sign up for the army ads, you know, the only good bug is a dead bug in Starship Troopers. It has the exact same kind of effect, is that you can kind of tell the world a little bit outside, even though it's all in her head, and it involves Jesus killing a whole bunch of soldiers. But it does have that same effect of like, oh, this is how people see the world. This is kind of, it's a very screwed up thing of not what the world is, but that's what they think it is. It works the exact same way, and I thought it was fascinating. And you said, yeah, he's done it through all of his movies. I'm like, oh yeah, he has too. He really has.
The other thing as well that really dates, the only thing that kind of dates this movie for me, and it genuinely made me laugh out loud, is you have this amazing sequence of the robot putting itself back together after Moses leaves the apartment. I really like that. I don't actually know if that hasn't been messed with, because it looks so good. I'm really curious to know if that has been played with since 1990. Because if not, that's some of the best stop motion puppetry guy in a suit I've ever seen, of it reassembling itself. But directly after that, you have the scene where Moses realizes that there's a Mark 13 sat at his house with his girlfriend, in inverted commas. And it's a great sequence anyway, because you see the guy get killed and the paper goes over his face and then his eyes move, which is just creepy.
It is really creepy. Yeah.
He has to try and call her, and the technology is like video phones, and you've got this great like analog digital blends of how the tech works. But to call her, he has to get some change out of his pocket and put it in the machine. And I thought, oh my God, that is the single most dated thing in this entire film. You show that to someone born after a certain year and they will not understand that at all.
Oh my God. It made me nostalgic, actually. I'm like, oh, remember those days when you actually had to have change in your pocket to call someone? If you were using a payphone. Like, I recently saw a movie that's set in 99, and it's the same thing. This girl kind of just wakes up on a beach, has to get change from someone to go on a payphone, doesn't know where she is. And because they're teenagers, she has to get her friend to like somehow go to someone else's house so they can call the brother, so the mother doesn't know it. And I was like, but no one can, but everyone's engaged because of dial-up. And I'm just like going, oh my God, I know what this is. Like, explaining to someone that process, the kids just look at me and go, but I'm like, no, we did not have mobile phones. We had to literally go to someone else's house, get them to call someone else if we didn't want our parents to know what was happening. There was work involved.
Yep. I've said this before to a few people. There are so many films that the entire plot would not happen if any of the characters had a mobile phone.
Yes.
And it's so funny when you go back and rewatch stuff, how much of especially horror films or scary films, it's like most of it is caused by the fact that they can't communicate, they can't get help. But if you had a smartphone in your pocket, problem solved.
Would never have happened. Or the amount of new movies where all of a sudden it's like, I have no service. I'm like,
because it's the only way they can get around the problem.
Yeah.
And it just makes me chuckle. It's the same as like being stuck somewhere that's pitch black. Well, I got a torch on my phone, I'm good.
Exactly. Yeah, but that is the one that, I mean, this is actually a really good futuristic world, because it does have this really cool mix of analog and video phone. And even as a kid, I thought we were never going to have video phones. That's the Jetsons. Now I'm looking at you on a screen. You're in Britain, I'm in Australia, so that happened. But you're right, the fact that he has to get changed to call her. There are certain things in older movies that they'll never get away from, because things like contracts or plans or minutes haven't been invented yet on your smartphone, on your video call. And it's all that. I love that stuff so much. I'm just like, oh, look at that. They guess in the future, but it's not quite there yet. But going back to the robot, I really love his design, and I loved how he moved. I know he's very strategically filmed from certain shots, so you don't necessarily see all of him at the same time, very rarely, or all of it at the same time. But from what you do see, he's actually really terrifying. Because my weird movie clock, I'm like, oh, okay, he's up and about. She's going to kill him. And that's the end of the movie. But of course, when you find out, no, you're only halfway through the movie, and poor Jill is going to kill him at least 6 more times. But it's a really cool design, and I like how it constantly changes how it moves. It's almost Transformer-like in a way without the actual transforming.
Yeah, it's trying to adapt to what it thinks it needs to do in order to kill her.
Yeah.
Because it starts off crawling around, and then it decides to stand up, and when it stands up, it's bloody huge.
Yeah.
Because when you do see a full shot of it, it kind of hammers home like how massive it is in comparison to Jill, at least.
Yeah.
I mean, it completely dwarfs her in every aspect. And I also have to question who designed certain aspects of it, because it's got a circular saw on its back. It's got those massive claw hands. But the bit that I don't know if I was alone, maybe you'll tell me that you thought the same thing, but how it chose to use the drill and where it was located on its body, and the fact that it seemed to only use the drill on Jill. And I was like, I feel like someone was trying to say something with this particular design.
I think he was. Like, I sort of connected it straight away to the whole they want humans on Earth to be infertile thing. So I was like, wait, is that what the robot does? It's like they got sent to houses to actually like rape a woman to death so she wouldn't, I don't know. I think I was reading too much into it, but yeah, that is a very large dick, and I do not want it coming near me.
Yeah, I don't know. I also really like the fact that the obvious solution was to call Shades to go and help her, but he's so high that he can barely stand up, and I thought that was hilarious because it solved the problem of why isn't someone coming to help her straight away.
Yeah.
And it was just funny because that was something else is the film has these really silent moments that make you really unnerved, and then it has one of those cuts that makes me jump. But then they would play like a heavy metal soundtrack or heavy rock soundtrack whilst other stuff is happening. And I feel like that's something that, especially nowadays, people can relate to, because I think people do that. I think there's a lot of people that don't like silence. And so if they're going to do something, they'll always have music in the background. And Jill was kind of like that. Like, her apartment was her safe space, in inverted commas, but she felt unnerved. And obviously, reality, it's because A, she was being watched by a creepy guy, and B, she had a killer robot right behind her.
Yes.
So she had good reasons to be unnerved. But I feel like the way that they juxtapose the silence with the heavy metal, and then while she's getting almost horrifically killed, we're watching a funny scene of Shades falling over because he's too high to stand up.
Yeah.
It's like it can feel a bit random, which is what I think critics thought of it at the time, but for me it worked.
No, it really does. I mean, I can see why critics didn't love it, because it is a very ugly film to watch. You are not, yes. I mean, the movie's trying to repulse you at every minute. And yes, we're talking about the creepy guy who just keeps throwing things at her that she just doesn't want, and he's literally watching her every single movement. Like, this woman has no privacy. And then all of a sudden you'll just get these browns and things, and the robot's really disjointed, as you're saying. It's got the saw in the back, it's got the phallic thing, it's got these kind of large hands, and it's the way it kind of leans up over people when you're sort of like, oh shit, it's behind you. Like, it's got all that. It's not.
It's got a very elongated neck that makes it sort of stick out and look imposing.
Yes. Yeah, it really does. And so I can tell people sort of watching this and going, oh, why am I wanting to be in this world? And what I do really appreciate about this movie is the fact that there is no light at the end of this tunnel. It goes, oh no, this world sucks. This world, even with the new Dread movie, you get hope at the end. Even though this is a world that is tough, you've got kind of fascist policemen just deciding whether you're guilty or not, like in kind of 1 minute. But that movie kind of gives you sort of hope. Doctor Who will always give you hope, because Doctor Who's going to solve everything, and the timeline's going to be right. This movie, they kind of opens the blind for the first time, and they kind of see the city, and it's like, oh, it's actually really pretty. Then she gets pulled out of it, and then it's just this I could kind of see people criticizing this movie for having too many endings, because every time you think you're safe, like, oh, okay, that's it. That would have killed the robot. Okay, we're done. Nope. She's pulled out of the window. Then something else happens, and then she's back in the apartment. Mo's dead, and then it kills some other people with those poor guy got trapped in the door. It's all this kind of stuff. And then even when in the shower, when I'm like, that motherfucker's going to stand up again, isn't he? This isn't over.
Yeah, exactly. That guy that got killed in the door also gives a line of dialogue beforehand that I knew was going to come back, and I almost missed it. And I feel like a lot of people did as well. But he makes a point of saying, when he's playing chess with the kid, that the way you beat a computer is the same way that he beat him. And he says the name of the maneuver, which is unimportant, but he says machines don't understand sacrifice, so they'll never understand how you beat him here. And of course, the way in which the machine does eventually get killed is the guy, as much of an asshole as he is, with his dying breath, kind of manages to blurt out the fact that what his weakness is, and then the machine is stupid enough to play that dialogue back to Jill.
Yes.
It doesn't understand that it's basically telling her its weakness.
Yeah.
And I almost missed the fact that callback was paid off.
I think I did miss that because I know, I think I did miss that, or I didn't put two and two together because I was sort of going, oh, I like how the robot's communicating. It's not its own voice. It's a collection of voices that it's collected throughout its time. So it's just kind of doing that really cool thing of like Bumblebee and Transformers. That's probably not there's an excuse, a thing I can think of when it plays songs to sort of tell you what mood he's in. This is just doing the same thing. It's just throwing all these voices back. And I completely forgot that he told her what the weakness is. And he doesn't understand the sacrifice for the mood. And she's like, okay, got to get him in the shower. And well, he technically throws her in the shower, but it is.
Yeah, that whole sequence where Dylan McDermott's character is kind of having like visions and they're kind of, so I might be reading too much into this, but I think it was by design, but I don't think that it worked the way they intended. But he makes his own callback to the fact that he was dreaming that it was raining, and then the robot starts speaking in his voice.
Yes.
And then they kill it with water. And the last thing the robot sees from its point of view is it's raining.
Yes.
And I was really confused by all of that, by what they were implying, which I think was by design, but that really just kind of felt like I think they were just reaching for too much like references, because obviously his name was Moses, he was reading from the Bible, they were reading out these verses. The film starts with a Bible verse, and I'm like, okay, I think you've gone way too far now. This isn't going to work, and it doesn't.
No.
Or maybe there was stuff that was cut, I don't know, but all of that just feels totally pointless.
No, it does that. This movie wants to have so many ideas, but I don't think it conveys everything. And I know it's a movie that I feel like I should have watched twice for this conversation, because I know I'm missing stuff, but I think that's because it wants to have so many ideas like piled on, like the religious references, the technology references, the government references, the advertising. Just it's kind of a sensory overload a little bit, where they could have just they should have pared a lot of it back a little bit, so you can just have your core main ideas and then you can just go with it. Because when it is literally robot in apartment murdering people, that is when I thought, okay, this movie's starting to sing a little bit. Like it's taken a little bit of time to work up. I kind of warming up to slowly, all right, robot in the apartment. Yep, I get it. Let's go. And through that, you can convey a few ideas, because robots are the best metaphor for humanity in general. So, but I think there was a wanting to this movie because, oh, we need to talk about religion. We need to talk about this, genocide, all this. And it's like, okay, now it's getting a little muddled. And because this movie is so brown, it's easy just to kind of, like when Peter Cushing is going on a 5-minute dialogue thing about something, my brain just goes a little bit. But that's because I think the movie is a little bit overstuffed in terms of that.
Yeah, and the annoying thing is, I think it could have pulled off one of them.
Yes.
But it needed to pick which one it wanted to do. Did it want to have this weird religious overtone? Does the robot have a soul? Is it alive? Which I think it is, and I'll get to why in a second. But or it needed to have these sort of propaganda radio things about how the world is not going great. You know, we're going to sterilize everyone. The robots are coming. Don't worry, they'll protect and save everyone. When in reality, that's not what they're going to do.
No,
because Jill figures it out way earlier than the film lets the audience know.
Yes,
and she starts ranting about the fact that it's what's going to help. You know, this is the government's plan, but it can't tell the difference between the enemy, because they never actually say what the war is.
No,
and what is what it's supposed to protect. And it's like, no, that's by design. That isn't a mistake.
No,
because it won't answer her when she says, what is your mission, what is your prime directive, for a RoboCop reference. I don't think it knows. That's half the problem. It just knows to kill. But the bit that I found so scary at the end, which is when the news report says that the Mark 13s are going to go into mass production, it's going to give 800 new jobs, they don't call it a robot. They call it a cyborg.
They do,
which makes me go, oh my God, that thing was alive. Some part of it, if they actually understood what a cyborg is, which is
Yeah.
also another thought I had, that they just didn't give a shit.
Yeah.
But if that was genuinely what they meant, then that means that it was alive and there was a person in there controlling it.
Yeah. No, it's that is an interesting point, because I sort of took it as because difference how they don't call robots, they now call it AI, which are two very, I do realize technically they are two very different things. I don't understand it, but I kind of do. But they'll use different terms to make sure that if you say robot, you think, oh, I'm going to think the Terminator. I'm going to think something scary that's going to out to kill us, not something else. If you call it something else, then sounds okay. Like, come and build cyborgs. It's fine. They're not going. A cyborg isn't going to kill you. A robot will, but a cyborg won't. But I think the movie does want you to question whether this thing is alive or not. I just think it gets buried under the other 6 things that this movie is trying to do as well. I
think the problem is that so much media has confused the difference between what is a cyborg versus what is a robot. Because
yes.
You said the Terminator, and they're a great example of confusing them, because technically all Terminators have the ability to learn and get better and become sentient, which makes them alive, but they're still synthetic life forms. They might have human skin on top of their metal frames,
yes,
but they're still machines underneath.
Yeah.
A cyborg is a human that has metal or augmented parts added to it.
Yes.
So you have to have a human brain, which is the bit that I think it could have some human brain elements in it, because all we started off with was a helmet. I don't see how a brain could fit in there.
No.
But sci-fi can do crazy things. You can transfer the consciousness of someone into a robot. And is that a cyborg? Because, you know, there's lots of films that have asked that question. At what point do you class something as alive?
Exactly.
But like you said, this isn't really the film to have that conversation.
No,
I
wish it picked a lane.
Yeah. Well, one thing I did notice going back to Creepy Guy, and I don't know if, again, I'm reading too much into this. So the Creepy Guy doesn't exist in the original comic. The original comic's like 6 pages long.
Yeah.
Like, most of this stuff doesn't exist. Her getting into the fridge to escape the infrared does.
Yeah.
That's all from the comic. But the Creepy Guy doesn't exist at all. His last name is Weinberg. He's a big, tall, fat guy that preys on women. And this one of the film's producers was Harvey Weinstein.
Here's the thing. I think that was an in-joke on set. I think because anyone who had to react to, they had to interact with Stanley and friggin' Weinstein, but Weinstein was maybe a bit more overt outwardly about it. That I think that just becomes an in-joke on set, and it creeps into the movie. And then when you watch it now, knowing what you do now, then you're just kind of like going, huh. I wonder if that was I've always said Scream 3 aged really well purely by accident because of what the movie is about, and clearly who also made the movie, not understanding the irony that it's about him, whether subconsciously or consciously. And you're right, it is. I think that did creep into a lot of movies because people had to put up with this bullshit. And it probably, we'll change the name to this as a little in-joke that we'll only get, that the 3 people who did it got. And now everyone knows, and we're just like going, I see that. That might not be the case. I just like to think of this. That is because how now I watch movies that have been made by Miramax, or distributed by Miramax, I should say. And I'm like, I think there's an in thing going on when people are referencing that he's a slob and awful to work with and predatory. And it sometimes creeps into the movie as a little like the Disney animators writing sex above Simba in the cloud or whatever it was.
Yeah. No, I know what you mean. But yeah, so that was Hardware, a really horrible, horrific, ugly film that I thoroughly loved and would watch again.
Me too. It's kind of weird. Sometimes you just watch these movies that are absolutely horrific, and I'm like going, would watch again. That was kind of fun. But this was actually a really great double because of just the differing tones. Like you had this way more wholesome Doctor Who and then you just get into this absolute sleaze, grimy thing of hardware, and that was such a great double. Thank you so much for coming on.
That's all right. Thank you for inviting me. It was really enjoyable, and I liked talking about films that weren't just about action.
Yeah, you get opportunity because you're a big action guy who knows a lot, but also you know many other things. Like I'm still waiting for that manga episode where there's definitely manga action movies out there.
There are a few. I probably will avoid them because a lot of them I don't like, and I'm trying to not go down the rabbit hole of covering stuff that I don't like because. You know, enough people do that already with just basically raging and hating, and I can do that. I can easily do that, and I'd be lying if I said I don't watch people that do that. But I'm trying to not make the show just that. There are times when I will, and there are episodes I've already done where I flat out said I didn't enjoy this, here's why. But a lot of live action anime stuff is not great. There are exceptions, though, and I would like to try and highlight them. The obvious one that springs to mind, because there's like 5 of them now, is the Rurouni Kenshin films, and they're amazing.
Yeah. No, they are. No, I do like the fact that you're very just honest. Like, if you watch a movie and you're just like, yeah, it was fine. I know that was Hydra was one, and Cop Shop. I think you're just a bit like, so you generally want to talk about movies that you enjoy, but you're not afraid of sort of saying, actually, this didn't make sense. What's going on with this thing? That's why I think Action Addicts is a great thing. It's not just praise, but it's not just people taking the piss out of things either.
Yeah. No, that's what I want to try and do. Like sometimes it's real easy to fall too far down one side, and it takes sometimes not posting an episode to sort of go, I'm just queuing up a bunch of stuff I already know I don't like, and I'm just going in to hate on it. And then at the same time, I don't want to have a bunch of episodes that I know I'm just going to really love, but I kind of I want to talk about stuff more specifically. So I try to find a guest that has never seen it, maybe has a different opinion to me, or can at least remember the details about the things I want to talk about.
Yeah.
I did one that will be coming out soon where I wanted the people that were on the show to not particularly like what we were going to talk about, and irritatingly they actually both loved it. So I had to be the one to point out all the negative stuff, and I sound like I hate the thing, but I actually don't. And I kind of have to like give a disclaimer. I actually like this film, but I have to be the bad guy to point out all the crap.
Well, no, that's what I enjoy about it, because there is definitely a back and forth. So please, people, if you you probably have listened to Action Addicts if you listen to this, but I would definitely give it a great recommend because it is a really fun and fascinating show. Speaking of which, please tell people where they can find your good work.
You can find me on Twitter at a really awkward name of Psycho Gold Gaming, which doesn't have a G at the end of it. I'm going to try and change that to just Psycho Gold to make it easier for everybody. But you can find the podcast under Addicts Action, because someone else had already taken Action Addicts, which really annoyed me. But
how rude.
Yeah, that's currently all we're on.
Yeah, no, please follow and listen. And time this comes out, you probably will be married, but good luck with your nuptials
Thank
coming
you very
up.
much.
And congratulations. And thanks for so much coming on. This was an absolute blast and a really, really fun double. Considering this was both first-time watches for me. And we will be back next week with another double feature. All right, thanks, guys. Bye.